Hey, sorry about that, everybody. Running a little bit late today. Seems like every few days, one of these video platforms decides to completely remake the interface. And so it's always a little tricky, but we're all good and up and running now. Like I said, sorry to be late on a Friday, but good to have you on YouTube. Good to have you on Facebook as well. And man, I'll be really glad to be back in our regular studio again. But nonetheless, we're here to do DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldog fans, presented today by our friends at Kroger. Of course, this is not a podcast. We will have a podcast coming up a little bit later on, though. So I hope you make sure you check that out. And of course, appreciate all of you being with us here today. We'll take a lot of your comments. Jay Shipe's always checking in, usually about first on the comments section for him. BTW here as well. B. Huds in here. Caleb Nelson as well. Yes, sorry for being a little bit late today. Sometimes I'm technologically challenged, and today was certainly one of those days. Let me also get my light on here so y'all can see me a little bit better. So we'll see if we can get that up and running. I'm maybe a little bit dark here. I didn't have the light turned on. But nonetheless, I'm glad to have all of you here. Matt Talley as well. Dr. Mo Morris checking in from sunny San Diego. We appreciate you being here, Mo. Thanks so much. Light Dog 1968, appreciate you being here. All of you for what should be really a fun show here today. We'll take a lot of your comments. I'm going to talk about Sony Michel in a couple of minutes for some reasons that I will get into then. It's not a very serious topic, but nonetheless, I think it's kind of fun. So we'll do that here in just a little bit. LL on YouTube says, thanks for keeping this going. Makes the world feel a little bit more normal. Well, obviously, that's our goal, LL. That's what we're trying to do. And he says the beard's looking pretty good right now. That's good to be able to hear there as well. He says he's going to grow his too. Well, that's good to know. Appreciate that. Robert Bryan over here on the YouTube side today, serving those veterans. We appreciate that, Bobby. Nigel Combs, thanks for the kind words on the beard. Appreciate that. Light Dog 1968 also noticing the hair is getting a little long too. Yeah, that's the real story. The beard is simply just a distraction to take your attention away from the fact that the hair is, man, oh man, it is really getting long here at this point in time. So nonetheless, as I said before, sorry for being a little bit late today. That's kind of my thing. DWB says, can we talk some recruiting at all? Seems like we might be in trouble with some of our top targets. So, I don't really know what to make of really much of anything of that right now, DW, because, I mean, for the most part, things seem to be somewhat frozen in place. And as far as like TreVeyon Henderson stuff, guys like that, those running backs go, Evan Pryor, to the extent that he was a Georgia priority, we sort of knew from the very beginning. In fact, you can go back to pre-quarantine. I was saying this on a DawgNation Daily that I thought there was a real chance that Ohio State was going to be a major player for those early running backs. But in terms of some other big names that are out there, I mean, I still think that Georgia feels pretty good about a lot of those guys. Matt Luke, the offensive lineman, for instance. I know that you've maybe heard about, various forces kind of making a charge on some of those guys. But as it stands right now, I think it's way too early to be too worried about anything in terms of the true, real, legitimate priorities for Georgia's 2021 recruiting class. We can certainly talk about that. Stacy Goebel says, still delivering those brown boxes. The delivery company that he works for doesn't stop for anything. Well, that's good to know, Stacy. I'm glad to hear that. VTW says it's weird to talk about another man's beard. The whole point of the beard, though, is to give us something to talk about. So I'm glad that people are having a good time with it. Eddie's here. He's having a good time with that there as well. Dr. Mo Morris says when it comes to TreVeyon Henderson, he didn't want to get in line behind Zeus, Milton, and McIntosh. That very well may be true. Ohio State, as deep as it is at every single position, is nowhere near as deep at the running back position, both on the field for this year. That's why Trey Sermon transferred in, and for 2021 recruiting as well. That opportunity, a program like Ohio State, at this stage of its development, just doesn't have early playing time to sell very much, but had that for those running backs, and that's one of the reasons why. They were so active with those backs early. Matt Talley checking in. Appreciate that. Frank Patterson says, who won yesterday's draft? Frank was one of the commenters in the show yesterday. Y'all go watch that over on the DawgNation YouTube page, or there's a story up about that at DawgNation.com. We can kind of get into the teams a little bit later on. Y'all can kind of debate on this if you want to. That was fun. Dale Westby says, can we talk recruiting and UGA football? That's what we're here for, Dale. Glad to have you here. Go ahead and drop your comments in of anything you want to start as a conversation, and we'll get into that for sure. Frederick Jones says, any information on Zach Evans? So, I think that Evans maybe as much to Florida. So in terms of how that ultimately impacts him, your guess is probably as good as mine. But it is definitely true that that his process was greatly impacted by a lot of that. So I'm sure that in terms of anybody that from the 2020 class was still looking for a home was obviously going to be greatly affected by this, and it may even affect the chances of Evans ending up on somebody's roster for 2020 for all I know. Keith Folds checking in from Griffin. John Paul Williams checking in as well. Wayne Folan checking in from Pennsylvania. Travis Hall checking in, saying, hoping y'all is well in the States. Hope you're staying safe yourself, Travis. Thanks for being with us. Margaret Brooks says she almost gave up. I don't know if that means giving up on me. Yeah, I was running late because I had a problem with YouTube. So I won't bore you with the details, but every now and then, just the process of going live is like more difficult than it probably should be. So I was kind of rolling. We're ready to go on Facebook and not ready to go on YouTube. And the other day we had an issue on Facebook, so they're all about the same. Chad Clark says, was it a long commute? Is that why we were running late? Yeah, I'll use that as the excuse on this. Derek Tillman checking in from Baxley, Georgia. George Wright checking in there, saying to everybody to hang in there. I should say George Wrigley. George, that's a good advice. We will be hanging in there. Brian Mullis checking in. Good to see Brian. Scott Gentry says, I'm going to be Wolfman Jack before it's over. You never know. Maybe I will be. You never know. Mark Godfrey says, can't nothing keep the Dog Nation down. That's true. Travis Hall also says we need sports in our life, and I think we do. And, one of the things I've really enjoyed over the last couple of weeks are the ways in which some coaches are really speaking out in a very hopeful, optimistic tone about a eventual return for the season, and the fact that we can kind of get back on the tracks for that may be easier than some people assume. And I think that coaches finding a way to be solutions oriented, finding a way to say yes to getting back on the field, and as opposed to continuing to look for ways to find reasons to say no. I think that's going to be really important. Listen, it's obviously wrong to deny the coronavirus's reality, but it's just as wrong, I believe, to wallow in its misery. And, for people like Adam Schefter, the NFL reporter, who suddenly decided that it's inappropriate to have an NFL draft because of, I guess he's going to call it the optics or whatever else. Listen, no one's denying the reality of the coronavirus. It's a very sad situation for some, a scary situation for others. We're going to acknowledge that. Yet things that can continue should, because on the other end of this, there is going to be a society left over, and doing things to help aid that recovery, I think, are important. I think the football plays a role in that. If we can do things without getting people increasing their chance of getting sick, we ought to be doing that. The NFL draft's going to be an example of that come April. College football is going to have its chances to be that in some form or fashion come the summertime. And so for those folks out there that are helping us find a pathway back towards playing sports again, I think they're doing the Lord's work. I really do. Phil Rogers reminding us it's Palm Sunday, a great reminder here. You may not be able to be inside your house of worship right now, but you can certainly still appreciate all of that, and that's certainly a good thought. Ron West checking in from Panama City. Boy, nice place to be. If you had to be quarantined somewhere, I guess not a bad place to be there. But Ryan, it's good to have you with us here. I appreciate that. Noel, I'm gonna try to do this one. LeSueur, did I do that right, Noel? Checking in from Augusta. Good to have you with us. Chili Vic says, it seems like ADs and coaches are hearing good news about the season. Yeah, I think what you really see there is, I know there have been some what do you want to call them? I guess surveys of the various athletic directors. They've said some positive things here as of late. I think one of the things that you're going to see is that leaders by nature have to adopt a degree of optimism, that no one wants to follow you if you don't have a level of optimism. So I think when you ask people who've worked their way up to the rank of being a leader to an organization, how they feel about the upcoming year, the upcoming season, I think they're going to approach that from an optimistic standpoint, because that is the mentality that's aided them in the past. And so it's not a surprise to me that when you hear various athletic directors polled or various conference commissioners polled, they say, yeah, we believe some form or fashion we'll be playing football again, because that's just the kind of optimism that's contagious, that allows people to sort of rise to the ranks of being a leader. And I think it's probably not a surprise that you're kind of hearing that from them there. Now, no one knows. I mean, I think that Kirby Smart's been accurate to say that when it comes to speculating about what the world's going to look like in a couple of months or even a couple of weeks, he's not wanted to do that. I think that's probably an accurate thing to do, is that, none of us know how quickly anything's going to change. We just don't. And anyone who speaks with you with certainty about saying that they do, whether it be for the positive or the negative, whatever else, I'd be really, really scared. I'd be very skeptical of certainty during this time. So I think Smart's approach from that standpoint has been correct. But while we all, I think, should have the humility of admitting we don't know how things are going to work out, there's nothing wrong with pairing some humility with some optimism, right? I mean, ultimately, what good does pessimism do anybody? So I think that's probably right. By the way, we have said that if the season, for whatever reason, will not be played, Gator Hitter Updater continues to roll on. We're big believers in that. Matthew Dill's checking in from Peachtree Corners. He says he's walking distance from the Marlows there in Peachtree Corners. That's a great neighborhood. We've been to the Peachtree Corners Marlows a couple times before. That's a really, really fun place to be. Mark Godfrey says if the season's canceled, hope the NCAA is going to give those seniors some extra eligibility. Yeah, I know where you're coming from. I think that's your heart's obviously in the right place on that, but I think it's way, way too early to start thinking about any kind of contingency like that. ABC Chiropractic checking in to say that it's a beautiful day in Virginia. Faith, not fear, guys. We're all in this together. And I do think this is really important. And I'm going to apologize here for a moment for being kind of a philosophical blowhard on all of this. But, I've said before that life operates on parallel tracks, that in the midst of one thing going on, simultaneous to that, you have another thing going on. And sometimes the thing that's going on one side may seem like a bad thing, and the thing on the other side is a good thing. That, I think people erroneously assume that there are good times in their life and bad times in their life. The truth is, there are good and bad things happening at the same time for the duration of your entire life. And it'll never be all good, and hopefully it won't ever be all bad. There are good and bad happening at the same time. And as ABC said on YouTube, I was outside earlier today for the podcast. I go outside to record my interviews just because I have to do so on my cell phone. And, to get a better signal, you got to kind of do that. So I go out there and, it's like you walk out early this morning, and it's already, or late in the morning, but it's already beautiful. Sun is shining. Everything looks great. And you think, I realize that there's some scary, strange things happening in the world, but it would be a sin not to enjoy the sunshine today. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that at a ballpark watching the Atlanta Braves, or even at a golf course, playing with some friends. I'm not going to be able to do that kind of thing. But there's no law against being out on the back deck today. There's no law on being out in the cul-de-sac, throwing a baseball around with my son, or kicking a soccer ball around with my daughter, or, hanging out with my wife. There's no law against that. And it would be a sin not to enjoy the sunshine if you're healthy enough to, even in the midst of kind of a scary time for our economy, uncertain time for our health. Parallel to that, here in Georgia where I am today, the weather's beautiful. So one way or another, it's important to enjoy every single moment that's out there, including these, even though that we're not really allowed to get in the car and drive anywhere here for the moment. Chris Bledis with a funny conspiracy theory. Wayne Haynes says, kind of weighing in on the topic here. Chili Vic says, do you think it was premature to cancel Wimbledon, or do they know something that we don't? So I'm not an expert on what I'm about to say. Let me just caveat this. But one of the issues with Wimbledon is, my understanding is the grass. That if you care about tennis at all, the one thing is that's what makes that tournament different than the other Grand Slam events is the grass. French Open's played on clay, and U.S. Open, Australian Open played on a more traditional surface, but Wimbledon is played on grass. My understanding is the grass dies, whatever kind of grass they use on that, given the climate in England, given everything else, that the grass dies, that you can't postpone the event at the All England Lawn and Tennis Club and then play it later in the summer because the grass won't be there. And, not playing Wimbledon on grass would be like not playing the Masters at Augusta National. For the people who care about that, I would say that if you have to delay it and you realize that the grass is not going to live, and I've been told that it won't. And once again, you should do all your own research on this. But I've been told that the Wimbledon grass will die. And so that's the reason why that event is being canceled, because I just think that from agronomical standpoint, or whatever the word is, a horticulture, I guess, from that standpoint, they're just not going to have the playing surface. I think I'm right about this, that the British Open, the golf tournament, which is not quite as sensitive, I believe they're still waiting to make the announcement of what they want to do. And that also happens kind of in that summertime of year, but they're still kind of waiting to make their official announcement, I believe, because the actual grass playing surface apparently is not quite as sensitive. So do with that what you will. But my understanding is that's why Wimbledon has already officially canceled itself for the summertime, is not so much related to the fact that they know things are going to still be terrible come June as it is they know the grass is not going to be in good shape. But you should do your own research on that because that's just what I heard. All right, let me do a couple more things here. Matt Talley, funny line on the Neyland Stadium grass. Yeah, Caleb Nelson also bringing them up there as well, for sure. Good to have a lot of comments kind of rolling in here. Enrique Murillo says, have I enjoyed having a beard? Is it itchy? Really, a lot of people said this would be true, and it's turned out to be true. That here we are going on however many weeks of this. It's been more than 2 weeks, I believe now. It seems like it's been 12 weeks, but I think it's been more than 2 weeks. It's really not that itchy anymore. It's not. So the only thing I don't enjoy about it is you'll notice that I do like shave a little bit to kind of keep it trimmed because obviously it would look weird if you didn't. Like that's kind of hard. Getting it even on both sides is not super easy. So that's a little bit more high maintenance than I wished it was. But you know, getting it off your cheeks a little bit, getting it above it gets way down here, and that was really, really itchy. But that not being the case anymore, okay. So I'm pretty well getting used to it. At this point in time now, I'm sort of thinking that I'm not going to shave it, nor I'm going to cut my hair or anything. I think I'm just going to live. I'm just going to live very loudly here, beard, big old hair, and just kind of enjoy the whole thing. James Wade says it's a Sean McVay look. I actually the other day they were showing that Chiefs Rams regular season game from a couple of years ago, and I was looking at McVay, and I was actually thinking that, you know, McVay and all these like offensive innovators, like the dress code for like the NFL offensive innovators, like the scruffy beard. I was thinking, gosh, I think I may have actually more facial hair than McVay does right there. They like to sort of keep like the 5-day trim going. That's kind of like their thing. Their look or whatever. I think I've actually surpassed that a little bit. I think I have. Chris Valletta says, I feel like I've been preparing for the quarantine my entire life. Snacks, games, movies. Yeah, so people kind of enjoying that in some respects. I'll give a shout out to my wife, who's done a great job of keeping our pantry full, refrigerator full. We've had all kinds of good food. I'm gaining weight by the whatever. So I kind of know where you're coming from on that. Lucy Bowers Boykin says, keep the beard trim close. Yeah, maybe eventually I'll have to. Scott Gentry says you need to do a goatee. Yeah, I wonder about that. I sort of feel like I'm more of a beard guy than a goatee guy, but I'm not really quite sure why. Phil Rogers says, hoping we play that cocktail party in October. Jacksonville, Florida would totally die. They don't have RV City and make that $30 million. Yeah, you know, not just for Jacksonville, but for St. Simons and Sea Island and Amelia Island and all those places down there. I'm hoping those dog fans are able to pump some money into that economy come late fall. I do agree with you on that. I do agree with you on that. Mark Brantley says he's doing away with his apocalypse beard as we speak. Can't take it anymore. So I felt like for a while because what happens is like I'll be outside after the show and I'll be running around with my kids, and if it gets sweaty, it's getting pretty miserable. But it's gotten way better for me lately. Way better. Gotten way better. Rich Olenek says it's great entertainment listening to him talk about his beard. Rich, I'm only responding to the comments, but we certainly appreciate you being here nonetheless. Matt Talley says you got to do a Hulk Hogan mustache for at least one show when you finally decide to shave it. Yeah, maybe I will. Maybe I will do that. VTW, the subject of those Georgia defensive backs, Eric Stokes and DJ Daniel. That was sort of one of the interesting things about the draft that we did yesterday. Draft strategy. Well, you can read about this at DawgNation.com. So Connor, Jeff, me, Mike drafted our Georgia team of, well, we only took 10 players each, but I mean, you kind of did it snake order, sort of like a draft. I could not keep up with the order. I kept getting confused on that, but we sort of went through all of that. And it was kind of interesting from a draft strategy standpoint that if you're looking to get the deepest roster you could possibly get, waiting on those receivers, waiting on those defensive backs kind of seemed like the way to go. For instance, from a receiver standpoint, if you couldn't get Pickens, then you might as well wait a few rounds because you're going to have good guys like D-Rob and Blaylock and Karis Jackson still available. Same thing for defensive backs as well. You know, Georgia, because it plays so many defensive backs, if you really were going to play a true competition amongst the Georgia roster, you can get yourself some really good DBs by going very late in that draft. For instance, a guy like DJ Daniel, who played a good bit last season, and I thought played at a pretty high level. Not perfect every single time out, but played at a pretty high level. That was a guy that you could still get pretty late in the draft. And ultimately us drafting against each other doesn't really matter. That's not important. But the key takeaways from something like that, I think they do matter, and that is important. And one of the things you notice in an exercise like that is just how deep Georgia's talent level is overall, especially at those receiver positions, those defensive back positions. Now, when it comes to receivers, you need to have a few more guys step up than have done so thus far. That's a really important thing for Georgia. But in terms of the possible names to do so, you got a really good chance to be able to do that. Let me get ready to give you a shout out to my friends at Kroger. By the way, Kroger has done an amazing job of keeping the store stocked. I've been over to see Kroger a whole bunch here as of late, and I got to tell you something. I haven't found really anything as of yet that has been needed that I haven't been able to find. So huge thanks to Kroger for all of that. And don't forget that they're one-stop, not shop, but one-stop hop for Easter stuff here. They got you covered. How about Kroger spiral sliced ham, or brown sugar, just $1.79 per pound with a card. That's $1.79 per pound with card. Obviously, Easter is a weird time this year because of the fact that we're not able to be with our family and friends as much as we want to be, but still a chance to celebrate. My kids have told us they're still expecting that Easter bunny to be here, still expecting those Easter egg hunts to take place and the fun meals and everything else. So Kroger's going to help you stay up on all of that. We really appreciate our friends at Kroger for making DawgNation Daily possible here today. And of course, we'll have the podcast version of the show coming up in just a little bit. One of the things I'm going to get into more on the podcast today is something on Sony Michel. And this is not important. This is not serious, but I did think it was kind of a fun topic for today. It kind of coincides with the fact that tomorrow we're going to announce the final winner of our Kirby Smart Top Moments bracket style voting that's been going on at DawgNation.com. I'm sure many of you can probably guess what the eventual winner is going to be. It certainly stands to be fairly underrated. I was looking at Fox Sports on Twitter the other day. Let me see if I can find this. Can I still find this? So Fox Sports College Football on Twitter put out this thing the other day about, let's see if we can find this. All right, let me see if I can scroll through and find this. So it was like the best person to ever wear the number 1 before. Now, I'm not telling you that Sony Michel is the best number 1 ever in college football history. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look at this tweet, it's going to take me a while to find it. Yeah, here we go. So you see like Kyler Murray's on here, Percy Harvin's on here, Larry Fitzgerald's on here, Jamar Chase is on here, Anthony Carter, the old Michigan receiver, Justin Fields made the list as well. I guess because you had to have a contemporary player on here. I'm not telling you that Sony Michel's the best number 1 ever in college football history, but can he not at least make the tweet? You got 8 guys on the box here. Michel doesn't even make the graphic. So from that standpoint, I think that Sony could have gotten a little bit more love from that. And so that's one of the things that makes the bracket style voting that's been going on at DawgNation, at least I guess a little bit more relevant, is that it is a good way to remind people about how special the Michel career was at Georgia, what he did, and how appropriate it is for that to be remembered over the course of the long haul. If for nothing else, because one of his great moments happens in one of the great games in recent college football history, that Rose Bowl win over Oklahoma. So I'm going to get more into that in the podcast today, kind of talking about sharing my feelings about why Michel may be a bit underrated. And we can obviously do that with some of you here right now. And of course, we appreciate you being a part of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Let's do a couple of other things, and we'll get ready to kind of get you all going for your Friday here. Jay Scheib says, just watched the highlight reel of Jamie Newman the other day. He likes that D ball, should back the defense off enough to let running backs run. You know, Jay, that's an interesting point because I was looking at a story at ESPN.com the other day. They were talking about how effective Tua Tagovailoa had been with short throws. A lot of his completions, maybe more than you realize, came behind the line of scrimmage, and then a playmaker made a guy miss and turned it into a big gain. And obviously that was one of the things that last year Georgia just couldn't really get going. Go back and rewatch the first half of Georgia Notre Dame. I think you saw a lot of instances in which Georgia was trying to make the safe, easy throw, kind of a lateral throw, playmaker having a chance to make someone miss in space, create a missed tackle opportunity, and then burst upfield for a big gain. But there that day, those plays just were not working. One of the more frustrating halves of the entire season for Georgia was first half against Notre Dame, even though it eventually led to a Georgia win. There just a lot left on the field that day. And you ask the question of why is a program like Alabama able to connect on so many short, easy throws? And why was that something that Georgia seemingly had a hard time turning into big games a season ago? I think the absence of the deep threat was a reason why. Whether Fromm wasn't connecting, whether receivers weren't getting open, whatever else, Georgia wasn't making defenses worry about what's happening behind them. So therefore, they're able to focus their attention on the line of scrimmage and really jam with some contact right there that made those short throws harder to do. So if you say that Jamie Newman loves that deep throw, accurate on those deep throws, big, strong arm, the kind of guy that can use his legs to keep a play alive, not only could that benefit Georgia to the tune of some more big completions deep down the field, it could also pay off to the tune of easier throws to the line of scrimmage, the kind of very safe, quick hitter throws to playmakers who can then use their athleticism to turn that into a bigger gain. Those kinds of plays can now be there because of the fact that you're obviously now forcing a defense to think about the vertical threat there as well. I think that's a pretty interesting thing to watch for. And Newman, as a good deep ball thrower, I do think it's an important thing to also pay close attention to there on that front also. We're going to get ready to roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down here in just a little bit. Of course, don't forget R.S. Andrews. As it's warm here today, they are also – where are our buddies at R.S. Andrews go? I lost my R.S. Andrews graphic. Anyway, nonetheless, R.S. Andrews is doing everything it can. Here we go. rsandrews.com. They deliver smile storage system that's not working. So find them online at rsandrews.com, and they'll take really good care of you. Let's get a few things here. Matt Rugavina says he's going to be rooting for Oklahoma over Tennessee this fall. Am I wrong for doing that? So I used to be a little bit of a SEC pride guy. Typically found myself rooting for the SEC teams against their, out of conference foes. I don't like Oklahoma. I do want Oklahoma to be exposed, but I can't root for Tennessee in that spot. So I'm kind of right there with you, Matt, on that. I guess I'm, kind of the point now where I'm just sort of looking for good games in situations like that. I'm curious to see if Tennessee shows some improvement, but ultimately, I'm not really there for the rooting for Tennessee on that. Not really looking to do that. Steve Jeffrey with the shout out, the throwback to the humble yourself thing. Love to see that. Appreciate that from him. Let's get some more Facebook comments here. Will Scott with kind of a funny line there. Always kind of funny to see that. Let's get a few more of these Facebook. Let me scroll up and see if I can get a few more. Pete Williams says Sony was great for UGA, but Chubb also deserves a tremendous amount of praise for coming back from the injury that he went through. Yeah, Pete's right about that. Obviously, Michel and Chubb together will be remembered as one of the great tandems in all of college football history. I don't think that's too strong of a phrase to say that. I'll also say that because Chubb is so popular, and it's amazing when he comes back to campus, the huge ovation that he gets. It's almost like he's so popular and was probably more well-known prior to Sony Michel going for him in terms of being a fan favorite there. But the energy that Chubb always seemed to have around him, I think sometimes made it easy to forget what Sony Michel was really all about for UGA. And obviously the Rose Bowl kind of helps change some of that just a bit. I mean, I think in their own way, we're obviously very special players. And obviously as a tandem, some really great memories for UGA. No doubt about that. Marshall Fleming says he still pulls for the SEC teams in out-of-conference games other than Florida. Listen, I think that's pretty good advice. If you're going to cheer for some SEC teams, stopping short of Florida is probably a pretty good way to do that. Robert Barnes says he's also all SEC until the day they play our dogs, which is probably the attitude I used to adopt as well. I'm not quite as much like that anymore, but I certainly used to be that way. Killian Worthy, love to see the optimistic words from you in our Facebook comment section. Appreciate that. VTW says, can you believe that Barry Sanders and Thurman Thomas played in the same backfield at Oklahoma State? That is really amazing. Very amazing. VTW says Sony should have gotten more carries in the national championship game. And you can make a case that maybe he should. I've always thought that line of thinking going back to the 2017 national championship game, and obviously it's a pretty common refrain, I do think that's a little bit unfair to Chubb to say that at the time that you'd be better off giving those carries to Michel than Chubb. That's one of those things for me when it comes to Georgia football, has always felt more accurate in hindsight than in foresight. But I kind of know where you're coming from on that. Let's do a couple of more, and we'll get ready to roll out of here. Howard Eubanks talking about how the receivers can respond to Jamie Newman. Yeah, I hope that chemistry with those guys is strong. I really do. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Matt Rugavina calling out some of the other YouTube commenters, a wellness check for Pine Sol, Lemon Scent, Ninja the Noob. Yeah, we haven't seen those guys much lately. I'm sure they're busy doing all kinds of stuff. Enrique Murillo says a lot of talk that USC Texas was better than the Dogs against Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. Thoughts? The one thing that you would never separate from Texas USC is the prestige that game had, whether it be multiple Heisman Trophy winners. Now Reggie Bush got his taken away, but Leinart and didn't Leinart win a Heisman? You had Leinart and Bush and Vince Young, who goes down as one of the great individual season performers of all time. So the greatness of those players obviously enhances that. It's Keith Jackson's last game on television, that goes along with that. USC prior to that game was kind of viewed as an unbeatable team. I mean, all these years later, that game happening in 2005, this being 2020, 15 years ago, all these years later can be easily forgotten just how invincible USC was thought to be before that game. So that's another thing that kind of adds to the prestige of that game. If you try to sort of put all that aside and just look at the games themselves, I don't know that you can play a better game, a more entertaining game because of the different styles of play and everything else than what Georgia-Oklahoma was. The fast start for Oklahoma, the roaring comeback for UGA, the thrilling finish in overtime. I don't think you can play a better game than what Georgia-Oklahoma was. But for the average person, whether it be media person, fan, or whatever else, it's impossible to separate all the history out of USC Texas for all the things that I mentioned. So I'm not surprised that it gets treated as the better game to have been played in Pasadena. I'm not surprised about that. But I think a lot of that's just related to the significance of the game. It was for a national championship, whereas Georgia-Oklahoma was a national semifinal. I'm not surprised that the 05 game gets the nod there. But I personally believe that's more related to the prestige of the game, more so than the actual events of it. It was, even aside, it was still a very good game, and Young's performance is crazy, crazy good. But if you're just going to go on the actual events of the game, I don't think that Georgia-Oklahoma takes a backseat to anything. But obviously, it's very difficult to separate the prestige from all of that. James Wade says USC was basically the NFL team in California at that time. Yeah, it's really something how much talent was congregated in Southern California back then. And it's crazy to think now that most of that talent's getting away, right? USC, UCLA both have fallen hard times in recruiting. That was not that long ago, 15 years. I mean, especially when you're 43 like I am, 15 years doesn't feel all that long ago. But man, the world of college football has changed so much in that time, where USC, for whatever reason right now, is just not getting those players. Kind of, recreating the magic after the Pete Carroll era. It's been very hard for them to do. Maybe if they'd hired Ed Orgeron, it would have gone differently. But amazing how much talent the Trojans were able to recruit at that time, and just how difficult they found matching that since then. Andrew Donald says, how do we lose to South Carolina? Yeah, boy, that's one of those things Georgia fans hope don't have to see a repeat of anytime soon. And obviously doing that work to make the team a little bit more bulletproof in games like that. Dylan Pye, on the subject of Michel and Chubb, says, I'll always remember them as being a pair. You can't have one without the other. Such a heartbreaking ending, but they did good in the NFL and very happy for them. That's exactly right. So Michel's already a Super Bowl champion. Nick Chubb's, I think, probably one of the higher drafted players in the upcoming fantasy drafts this year. So from that standpoint, Chubb and Michel are not only looking back on great college careers, but they've got plenty to be excited about for their NFL futures as well. It's a really good point. Let's do a couple more. We'll get ready to go. Travis Hall says, if you're going to talk about how did Georgia ever lose games, in addition to South Carolina this past year, go back and look at Tech and say 2016, something like that. Yeah, a lot of those memories are hard to die for Georgia fans, although you do try to put them in the back of your memory. Keith Fold says, talking about the Rose Bowl, the game itself is the best ever Rose Bowl, highest score ever, double overtime, biggest comeback ever. Yeah, those are good facts to go along with that. But so much of what we think of as great games is more related to the atmosphere around the game. And if I was a national media person, not a Georgia person, it's just way too easy to argue for the prestige on the field when Young and Leinart and Bush and all those guys played against each other. By the way, I also saw where I guess Leinart was on Twitter last night during this game campaigning for Reggie Bush to get his Heisman back. You may remember that Bush had to vacate the Heisman because of some NCAA violations. And it just goes to show you how when it comes to like what is kind of viewed as a rich power program like USC, there'll always be an argument to go easy, lenient on them when it comes to NCAA violations. But back in the Jim Herrick era, when Georgia basketball had gotten a little bit of trouble for what really, in retrospect, seemed like a pretty minor thing, there was very little public campaigning for any kind of leniency right there. It's just kind of funny how various programs get treated in that regard. Very, very funny how different that can be. Phil Rogers asked about Boss Andrews. How's he doing? That's a good question. Maybe we can check in on Boss here at some point in time. That's a good question. Andrew Donald says, who's Jake Fromm going to play for in the NFL? I saw where Dan Orlovsky, the ESPN analyst, came out and said that he thought that the Saints would draft Fromm in the second round and become the heir apparent to Drew Brees. I don't know what I think about that. I feel like one of the ways in which analysts typically get it wrong is by comparing players simply because they look like each other and a little shorter, arm strength similar. I think it's just way too easy to say, oh, well, Fromm's the next Drew Brees because they have a similar body type. But that's the road that Orlovsky went down recently. So maybe that does work out. Maybe that does work out. Football fan says Jake Fromm is Jared Goff. Football fan, probably. I would not believe it's Georgia fan. I mean, I'm assuming he intended that as a slight, but the truth is Goff got a team to a Super Bowl. So listen, when it comes to all the guys who played quarterback, being one of the 32 that starts in the NFL and being one of the 2 that emerges as a conference champion, that's not necessarily a put down. John West going back to look at some old memories for Georgia. Always good to see those good old memories. Appreciate that. Robert Barnes says he thought our Rose Bowl victory was the best ever. That's pretty good to know. Rob looking forward to some fishing, some hunting, some boating. A lot of those things can be done from a social distancing standpoint. So if you're getting out to do that, I hope you're having yourself a good time. Stay healthy, but I'm glad to know that you're able to do some of that kind of stuff. I guess some of the turkey hunting facilities and things like that may have kind of closed down or travel's limited right now. So I don't quite know all the official particulars around some of that kind of stuff. But I know a lot of folks are trying to do what they can. All right, we're going to get ready to go here. Huge thanks to all of you. Big thanks to RS Andrews, making the RS Andrews cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. They do all those things for us. They can do all those things for you. Also, our friends from Kroger here as well. We could not do DawgNation Daily without Kroger. That's true every single week of the year. Even more true right now, though, when it comes to all the things that they're doing to help keep us safe and happy and food on our table and everything else. And they got great deals going for you here as well. I got standing rib roast. It's just $6.99 a pound right now when you use your card. You can also pick up some sides, some desserts to get ready for a great Easter season there with our friends at Kroger. Eddie wants me to make sure I remind you on the way out the door here, it's time for our Gator Hater Updater. Of course, lousy, stinking Gators. Long time since they have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you're not enjoying your quarantine right now, your social distancing period, imagine how worse it would be to know that your favorite team had gone 1,252 days without beating their big rival. 1,252 days since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. We love being able to say that here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. I'll also say this. I hope all of you are getting ready for a great, great weekend. Enjoy it the best that you can. Stay safe. Continue to wash your hands and keep your distance from everybody else. But make the most of the moment, no matter what the moment finds you doing. Have a good time. I'll see you back here on Monday, 10 a.m. for another edition of DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody.